So here we're really going to look like what it really means when we multiply decimals. So we've looked at some procedures and just how it works, but I want to show you like why it works before we get too far into it. So the first thing is when I'm multiplying a whole number times that decimal. So here you can see I have 3 times 3/10. So we're going to be using this grid. So this entire grid that we're looking at equals 1. So the whole big thing equals 1. Then you'll notice if I cut it down just straight down either this way or this way, that is 1/10 because it's cut into 10 chunks, both going across and going up and down. And then also you can see that this little chunk, right, would be 1/100th. So 0.01, because I've broken this entire grid into 100 pieces, and this would be one of them. So I have 1 whole, and I have tenths, and I have hundredths here, all in this grid. So what does it mean when I'm multiplying a whole number times this decimal? Well, this whole number, remember, tells me, well, how many of these chunks do I have? So I'm going to go ahead and color this. So I see I have 3/10. So I'm going to use my first one as being green. So there's 1/10 this entire way down. Here's 2/10 this entire one. And here's 3/10, right? And you can go across or up and down. It doesn't matter. So here's one chunk of those. So now I'm also told here that I have 3 of them. So if that's 1, here's 1/10, 2/10, and 3/10. This is my second chunk right here. And then my third chunk. So 1, 2, and 3/10 is my third chunk. These 3 up here tell me this many. Okay, so then I can go ahead and account, and I see that I have a total of 9/10. Right? Because this is the only piece that's not colored in, and that would be a 10th. So I've just really said I have 3 different chunks of 3/10 each, which gives me a total of 9/10. So let's look at that again. So here this can be done with hundredths as well. So here I see I have 24 hundredths, and remember 1/100th is one of the little squares, and I have 4 chunks of that. So let's go ahead and look at that. So here I know is 10 hundredths, here's 20 hundredths, and then 4 more. So there's 1 chunk right there. So let's look at another chunk. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So that blue is my second chunk, and this tells me I need 4 chunks. So 1, 2, if I go all the way up here is 12, and I go all the way back down is 22, 23, 24. So that's my third chunk. So now let's do our final chunk. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I go all the way down, that's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So I see I have my different colors are my 4 different chunks, and each chunk is 24 hundredths. So I have a total of, if this is an entire whole, we know that this would be 100 1/100ths. So I have 96 of them that are colored in. So I've got that 0.96. So now let's look at what do I do if I'm multiplying 2 decimals and I don't have that whole number. Okay, so let me move this a little bit. So one thing we do is we pick one side to be the 0.02, and it doesn't matter, the 0.2, and one side to be 0.3. So then I'm going to color them in, and I'm going to color in different colors. So if this going up and down is 2/10, here I've got 1, 2/10 colored in red. So then I'm going to use blue for my 3/10, and this is going to go sideways. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So now that both of those are done, I can see where they overlap. And those 2 colors overlap, and I'm using purple on purpose here, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1/100ths, right? We're no longer in tenths, we're in littler chunks. So I know it's 6 1/100ths. So I have to make sure that my decimal is in the right place. So let's look at this again. So now I have 7/10 and 3/10. So I'm going to put my 7/10 on the top, and again, it doesn't matter which one is on top and which one's on the side. So I have my 3/10. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. And I'm just coloring these pretty quickly here. So then I know my 7/10 goes up and down. So there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So then again, now that I've colored them in, I can see where they overlap. And they overlap in this little square right here, which contains, if we count all of these up, 21 hundredths. And remember that I have to have my decimal in the right place. So I'm dealing with hundredths, so I know I have to have 2 places after my decimal. Okay, so this is just a pictorial representation of what we're looking at, right? Because we know that we can just go ahead and multiply them and find where the decimal goes, but what does that actually mean, and why do we do it that way? This is why, because when I'm multiplying, it's the overlapped pieces. So now what about hundredths? Does it work? Well, yeah, it would still work. Each of these, if I was multiplying by 100th, I could break this top 10th into 10 chunks, which is really hard because it's going to be very small, but it would work the same way. So I could color in how many hundredths I have across the top and how many hundredths I have going down the side, and just kind of count how many pieces left. So it works no matter if I'm doing whole numbers or tenths or hundredths or even thousandths. It's just how small of the chunks are we going to break it into. So this is just our visual representation, and I want you to think about this as kind of being one whole, and our tenths are being kind of a tall skinny thing, and our hundredths being a little one. And we'll keep working with that and seeing what we can do with that as well.